everybody, and welcome to the Remembering Akron podcast. I'm your host, Derek Maxfield, and today my guest is Russell Rosenburg. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. So, your story starts before World War II in 1938. So, you were born actually during the Great Depression then.
Well, at the end of it, yes.
And you were born at home?
Born at home.
Right there in the farmhouse?
In the farmhouse, there was three of us born in that farmhouse.
Really? Was there somebody there to help your mother?
Well, at that time, we always had a relative or a neighbor that came in, and luckily I had one aunt that was on the right there. Anytime you needed anybody, she was there, and we had a neighbor lady that was always willing to help. You know, whenever you looked after each other back then.
Yeah, that's nice. How many siblings did you have?
Well, there was six brothers and a sister.
Very nice. And where did you come in that line?
I was next to the end. I'm the younger, one of the younger ones.
One of the younger ones. All right. And your parents were Howard and Nettie?
Right.
Can you tell me about them?
Well, my father, his father came from Germany in the 1870s. He's not sure what year. Him and his father came over on a ship. His father died on the ship.
Oh, no.
So he came into New York City as an orphan. And he was sent to an orphanage in And when you got to be 14, if you had a job and during the summer you could go work, they used to rent you out to farmers. So he got working for a farmer on Rapids Road in Sand Hill, and he worked the summers there. He worked there 2 summers, and when you got to be 16, if you had a job, you were done with the orphanage. So he had people that would hire him, and he left and worked for farmers, and he met my grandmother. Her family immigrated from Ireland. They lived in Lockport. So she was Mary Cassidy, and they had 8 children, and my father was the oldest. And that's how my father got here, and my mother...
What did your father do for a living?
Farmer, all his life a farmer.
Okay.
He bought the farm that we lived on. I'm thinking, well, he rented it for years, but he bought it about, I would say, 1949, somewhere in that. So we lived on that farm. There was 96 acres, and he rented 100 acres from another landowner. So we had 196 acres.
Wow, okay. And you were about to tell me about your mom.
Well, she was a Cummings from a big family. There was 8 in that family. And she was on Moore Road, which is in Sand Hill. And, of course, the Cummings came here in 1627. I've got the family tree traced right back.
Wow.
Somebody was fortunate enough that they kept it up. Isaac Cummings came in 1627. And it's kept...
That's a long line.
Yes, it is. And it was a big family. Always, I must say, my grandparents on my Cummings side were friendly and open to everybody. And my father's side, my grandfather passed away when I was quite young, but I can still remember him. And my grandmother, Mary Cassidy, she had that Irish temperament. And I'll tell you a little story about her. When I was, probably 5 years old, she used to come up, and for some reason, she didn't like the name May. But I found out that in Ireland, it's a nickname for Mary. And her name was Mary Cassidy, and she didn't like being called May. So my older brothers one time, they said to me, when she came up to say, "Hello, Grandma May." And I said, no, she don't like that name. Well, they kept talking. Oh, she won't mind. She might holler at you, but she can't catch you. You know, run if she comes after you. And they convinced me to do it. And I said, hi, Grandma May. And I learned two things. You don't call her Grandma May, and some grandmas can run pretty fast.
That is a good story. How did your parents meet, do you know?
I really don't know. Of course, I had an uncle on my mother's side marry my father's sister. So the families knew each other.
All right.
And
very good. So you grew up in the Newstead area.
yes.
And where did you go to school?
At District Number 4, right on Sand Hill Road, the same road I was born on, just about a mile north. There was a country school there. When I started, it had eight grades and two different teachers, two rooms. And they centralized the school then when I was in, I think, third grade, and they only went to fourth grade then. At fifth grade, we had to go to Akron. But that country school was something. I think I learned more in those 4 years from the teacher we had, which was an excellent teacher. Anyone that had her could read and write. By the time they got out of fourth grade, they could read anything. And she was just a super teacher.
What was her name?
Stacia Ogden. She was well, you used to call her an old maid back in those days, but she never married. And she had a sister that was a school teacher, too. But she was just teach 4 grades at one time.
Wow. And then you went on to Akron School.
I left school when I was 16. There were some problems at home that probably a lot of it was my fault, but I left home at 16 and I went to work for another farmer. And I worked there till I was a little over 17 and a half. And I said, well, my older brother, that he'd got drafted at the end of the Korean War. He was in basic when he got drafted and the war ended. And so he was telling about the things, that he did in the service and showing his pictures. So I thought, that ain't that bad. So when I was 17, I joined for 3 years.
And you went into the Army?
Went in the Army, yeah.
That was kind of a dicey time to be in the service, wasn't it, during the Cold War?
Well, it was in Alaska because we're close to Russia. That was the big thing there. They were worried about Russia. They had what they called the DEW line, the distant early warning, the circle of radar installations, remote, to guard from the north. And my main base in Alaska was Air Force Base, even though I was in the Army. And they had the fighter jets there, and you'd hear them scramble, whether it was practice or what, you would hear them, the sirens go, and they would scramble and take off to the north like they were going to intercept Russians. But it was, a dicey time because of the proximity we was to Russia and the way the politics was at the time.
Mm-hmm. So that must have been Eisenhower's term, wasn't it?
Eisenhower was my commander-in-chief.
Yeah. What did you think of old Ike?
I loved him.
A lot of people did.
Yep.
Still one of the best presidents of the 20th century, I think.
In my opinion, he's the best president that I've ever been under. You knew where you stood, and he didn't forget what he said. If he said something, he stood by it.
So you served for 3 years, you said?
Yes.
And how long were you in Alaska?
27 months. They extended my time there because of my MOS, my military occupation number. I was trained as a tank mechanic and a wheel vehicle mechanic. Normally they trained them one or the other, but I was trained on both. And wherever they got behind as far as track vehicles or wheel vehicles, they would send me and maybe a couple other guys to help them get caught up.
Wow.
Now, we had other track vehicles other than a tank in Alaska. They had an infantry track vehicle called a Weasel that was lightweight to go on snow, and it would go 35 miles an hour on snow, and it would tow sleds or tow infantrymen on skis. We had the infantry there, and they would ski behind them. You could move got people fast. They could go cross country, and we had a bigger vehicle that was an otter it was an amphibious vehicle. And so Alaska, of course, has got a lot of people think of Alaska in those days as ice and snow, but it's got swampy muskeg area, and these otters would go right through that. It even had a propeller. If it got deep enough the tracks didn't touch, you could kick on the propeller.
Wow. That's really interesting stuff. You also were on the rifle team there, I understand.
Yes, I always had a knack for marksmanship. When I was a kid home, my dad used to pay us a nickel for a woodchuck. They would dig the holes in the pasture, so we would buy our 22 shells, and you made them count because they cost 50 cents a box. And I got to be pretty good at it. When I went in the service and they gave me the M1 rifle, wow, that was really something. So I was high man in the company in basic training. I won an identification bracelet. It's presented to me by, I remember his name, Major General Ward. So I scored 236 out of a possible 250.
Wow.
So in the 3 years I was in the service, I was high man 3 years.
Wow.
Out of the company. And they started a rifle team in the winter of 1957. We shot indoors at 50 foot with 22. So I didn't have to volunteer. They told me, you're on it. So I represented the company, and we shot against other company teams. And then when the weather broke, we went outside on the regular rifle range with a 30-06 M1. And I shot on a company team there, and then they picked the best for the headquarters company team, and I was chosen, and we went to Fort Richardson, and we shot on the All-Alaska Championships, and our team came in third.
Wow.
If I would have had more time, I could have went to Camp Perry, but I didn't have enough time left in my hitch, and I wasn't going to re-enlist just to go to Camp Perry.
Well, I don't blame you there. So you got out of the service, and what did you do next?
Well, I had an older brother that worked at Excel, and he says, hey, they need a truck driver. And I worked on trucks and drove trucks for 3 years, so I started out as a truck driver, delivering parts around the Buffalo area. And some days when there was nothing to deliver or pick up, they taught me the machining trade. And so I picked that up, and after a year, they took me on as a full-time machinist. So I worked in the different departments, the grinding, the mill, and the lathes, and always when a machine would break down, they had maintenance man, but I always seemed to have a knack to fix something that was broke. I could see why this didn't work. So they say, would you mind going helping the guy fix this, So I did it. And after about 15 years, they asked me if I would take on the maintenance job full time. They said, try it for 30 days. If you don't like it, then... So I took it, and I think I did it for 17 years or something like that.
Wow.
That was a one-man mason. I did everything from the electric, the plumbing. I read a lot of books. That's where I learned this stuff.
I see.
The electrical work, plumbing, it seemed to be natural, wasn't that complicated. But and I did the mechanical work on the vehicles they had.
Wow. A little bit of everything.
Yeah, always been kind of a handyman.
Yeah, I guess. And somewhere along the line, you got married.
Yes. When I was 7 years old, a family moved next door, which is, I don't know, a third of a mile away maybe. And they had a daughter that was a year younger. And she started the country school at that time. She was in first grade and I was in second. And right off the bat, I mean, there was a lot of other girls went to the country school. There was just something different about this. This girl was different than the other ones. And she had a younger sister, a younger brother, and an older brother. And her mother and father were super people. And got to be friendly with them. And after the fourth, when she got to fourth grade, they moved to Greenbush Road, which is 2 houses from where we live now. But it was close enough, could ride a bicycle over. And we used to fish and swim in Murder Creek and with her older brother and stuff. But I've knew her for a long time. But I went into service. We never went out as teenagers or anything. And I went into service. I wrote letters to her now and then. I had girlfriends. She had boyfriends. And in fact, we both got serious with different people. I was engaged to another girl, and she got engaged to another guy. And just about the same time, we realized it wasn't going to work out. The girl I was engaged to and myself. So we split on friendly terms, and I didn't even know that she had, her engagement had ended. And I used to go over there and see them now and then, and I went over one Saturday, and her mother invited me over for strawberry shortcake, is how it happened. She knew I loved it. When they lived next door to me, we used to pick the wild strawberries, and she made shortcake out of this world. But she invited me over for shortcake, and I was going to meet 2 of my buddies, and I had a date with another girl. So I had the shortcake, and I said, I've got a date. I gotta go. And Carol says, yeah, I got a date too. And to this day, I don't think I said it, but the words came out of my mouth. I'll break my date if you break yours. And about 2 seconds later, she said, okay. So we went to the drive-in, and a year and a half later, we got married.
That's a nice story. And so you've been married ever since?
Been married it'll be 60 years in January.
Well, congratulations. 60 years. That's pretty remarkable these days.
Yes. Yes, it is.
And you have 3 children?
3 children. I've got Dawn. My oldest is Dawn. She married Floyd Raywald. She lives in Wilkesville. And my next was a daughter, Darlene. She's married to Dan Frank. She lives not far from where I grew up on the same road. She works at Grayback over on, it's not Genesee Street. It's it's over in Lancaster anyhow. But she works there. She's been there 30-some years. My oldest daughter, she has a blacktop ceiling business. Her and her husband, who he's retired, they run, and she works part-time at the golf course on Kearney Road. And my youngest is my son, Keith. He's a foreman at Ford Gum.
Oh, right here.
Yep.
Okay. Very good. Now, I understand that one of your great claims to fame is that you have been Fireman of the Year 3 times.
Yeah, I don't think it's happened to anybody else. It's just certain projects that I really took interest in and made sure they got done. I've been in the top 10 responders different years, but that's a matter of luck if you happen to be home when the monitor goes off, you know. But
53 years of service with the fire department. That's a long time.
It doesn't seem like it, but when you look at it that way, yes, I see a lot of changes. I think back and from what it was when I joined, And we used to have to tow fire trucks to get them started to go to fire.
Wow.
That was the equipment we had, and now we're right up there with any of them and trained. We've got good training, and of course the state has made a lot of these courses available. It used to be the old firemen showed the younger firemen, but the only bad part was they showed you the wrong way to do it too, because they didn't really know the right way to do it. That was the bad part. But the system worked until we got training, and we happened to have one fireman joined. He bought a house near me, and he was a captain in the Buffalo Fire Department. And he asked about the local fire company, and I told him that I'm a member. You want an application? And I got him an application, and the first fire we went to was just a little shed fire on Martin Road. And we squirted water on it till the fire went out, So we got back to the hall, we're putting things away, and he says, "Boy, you guys need some training." "What do you mean?" "We got the fire out, nobody got hurt." He says, "Didn't you ever hear of attacking a fire?" "What do you mean?" We were not, didn't know what he were talking about. So he told our chief at that time, Don Miller, a very good chief. He did it the best of his ability. He says, "You guys could use a lot of training." He says, "You got to learn how to attack a fire." And the chief says, "Well, is there courses out there?" And he says, "Oh, yeah." He says, "There's courses available." And he says, "Give me the list and we'll get them." And boy, and I'll tell you, in a year, you'd never know we were the same fire company.
Really?
Yep. That guy's name was Chet Bauerlein. And when we built this, not this last edition, the edition before, he was the chairman in charge of that. And he even called Jack Kemp's office, he was our congressman, to get funding for it. And he made a lot of phone calls and made it possible. We never thought that he could do it, but he did. And we dedicated our recreation part of that hall as the Chet Bauerlein
Nice.
Building.
Well, we're just about out of time, so I'm going to ask you the most difficult question. So imagine a generation from now, and you're gone, and your grandchildren are telling their children about you. What you would hope they would say?
Well, I know what my oldest grandson is going to say. He says he had rules and you had to go by them. He's 32 or 33 years old, and he lived with us for a while. And he has told people, when there's rules, you got to go by them. He says, "My grandpa taught me that. He had rules in his house, and you went by the rules. Everything went smooth if you went by the rules."
All right.
So that's try to teach them your whole life is rules. You follow them, you don't have trouble. If you don't, sooner or later you're going to have trouble.
Yeah. So if you could offer any advice to your great-grandchildren or descendants, what would that be?
Well,
follow the rules.
Follow the rules and learn from history. Learn from other people's past mistakes. Don't make it yourself. Learn from their past mistakes.
I think that's good advice. And on that note, Russell, I want to thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening in, and remember to tune in to the next episode of Remembering Akron.